The small town was quiet in the early morning, with only the sound of birds and the occasional car passing by. At the heart of the town stood a little diner that had been running for years. It was painted in soft yellow, with a small sign above the door that read, "Open for breakfast." The windows were always clean, and through them, one could see the polished wooden counters and the warm smell of fresh coffee drifting out every morning. The woman who owned the diner had been there for as long as anyone could remember. She was known for her warm smile, the way she greeted every customer like they were a friend, and for her uncanny ability to remember everyone's favorite orders. People trusted her, not just for the food she served, but for the way she made them feel at home. Life had not always been easy for her. She had worked hard to run the diner on her own, taking care of bills, supplies, and customers, but somehow, despite the long hours and the challenges, she managed to keep it cheerful and welcoming. On this particular morning, she moved around the diner with practiced ease. She wiped the counters, arranged the condiments on each table, and hummed softly to herself as she prepared the coffee. The smell of sizzling bacon and fresh bread filled the room, creating a familiar comfort for anyone who stepped in. A few early regulars had already taken their seats, quietly chatting about the weather or the local news. The woman moved from table to table, pouring coffee, serving plates, and sharing small jokes that made everyone smile. She prided herself on keeping the diner a safe and friendly place. Over the years, she had seen all kinds of people: travelers, bikers passing through, families, lonely old men looking for company, but she never judged anyone. Everyone, no matter their story, was welcome at her diner. Her belief was simple: kindness mattered more than appearances, and everyone deserved respect. As she was arranging the plates for the breakfast rush, she noticed something unusual. A black motorcycle pulled up outside, the engine rumbling low and deep. She peeked through the window and saw a man getting off the bike. He was wearing the typical leather vest with patches, tattoos running down his arms, and a hardened expression that came from years of living on the edge. There was something in his eyes, though, that told her he wasn't here to cause trouble. He looked desperate, almost scared. She went back to the counter, pretending not to notice, but her instincts told her something was about to happen. She had learned over the years to trust her gut. Sometimes it was the difference between a small inconvenience and a major problem. The diner was still quiet, with only a few people scattered around, and she felt the tension in the air without even understanding why. The man pushed open the door and stepped inside quickly. He looked around nervously, like someone being chased. The bell above the door jingled, and the early customers turned to see the stranger. He didn't speak at first. He just walked up to the counter, glanced at her, and then around the room. His eyes were darting, his breathing fast, and there was a sense of urgency in every movement. She came closer, trying to appear calm, her smile steady but careful. "Can I help you?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a tone of concern more than suspicion. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned slightly on the counter, trying to catch his breath. Then in a low voice, he muttered, I need a place to hide, just for a little while, please." Her mind raced. She had never been in a situation like this before. A person asking to hide in her diner could mean danger, trouble, or even legal issues. But as she looked at him, she saw fear, not threat. She saw someone who needed help, and despite the possible risks, her heart went out to him. "Okay," she said carefully, keeping her voice steady. "You can stay here, just follow me." She led him to a small back room that no customer usually saw, a place she used for storing extra supplies and occasionally for a quick break. It wasn't much, but it was safe, out of sight and quiet. He followed silently, and once the door was closed, he slumped against the wall, relief washing over his face. "Thank you," he whispered. They're after me. The police, they don't understand." She nodded, offering him a bottle of water. "I don't need to know why," she said softly. "Right now, just stay calm. You're safe here." Outside, the morning continued as if nothing unusual had happened. A few customers chatted, plates clattered, and the coffee machine hissed. But inside, the tension was thick. She glanced toward the door every few minutes, listening for any sounds that didn't belong, and she realized that helping this man would require careful thinking. For a while, they just sat in silence. The man was visibly shaken, and she offered him food, coffee, and a small blanket from the back room. She tried to make him comfortable without asking too many questions. She understood that pressing for details now could make him panic. She had seen enough people in distress to know that sometimes the best help was just to be there. After some time, she started asking small questions, not about the police or his past, but about simple things like whether he liked coffee black or with milk, whether he wanted his eggs scrambled or fried. These small details helped ground him, helped him realize that there was a moment of normalcy in the chaos. While he ate quietly, she kept listening for sounds outside. Her mind was racing. She thought about what could happen if the police found him here. Could they trace him to her diner? Could this put her in danger? The questions were endless, but she knew she couldn't abandon him now. Something deep inside told her that helping him was the right thing to do, no matter the risk. As the minutes passed, the man began to relax slightly. He even managed a small smile when she handed him a cup of coffee. She noticed the tattoos on his arms, the scars on his knuckles, the weariness in his eyes. It was clear he had lived a hard life, a life full of danger, but also one that had taught him resilience. She felt a strange connection to him, not because of who he was, but because of the shared understanding that life wasn't always fair and sometimes the right thing to do was help someone in need. She continued her work in the diner, moving back to the counter, serving customers, wiping tables, and keeping an eye on him at the same time. It was a balancing act, one that required focus, patience, and courage. The early morning rush came and went, and still she kept him hidden, calm, and fed. By mid-morning, the man had calmed down enough to talk a little. He explained in bits and pieces that he was part of a motorcycle group that sometimes ran afoul of the law. He hadn't committed any serious crime that day, but the police had pursued him relentlessly for reasons he didn't fully understand. Her heart went out to him. She didn't judge him for the life he had chosen, or the mistakes he had made. She simply wanted him to be safe. The day went on, and more customers arrived, each one unaware of the stranger in the back room. She served them with her usual warmth, kept the diner running smoothly, and managed the anxiety building in her chest. She was aware that what she was doing could have consequences, but at that moment it didn't matter. All that mattered was protecting someone who couldn't protect himself. By the afternoon, she had a plan forming in her mind. She knew she couldn't let him stay forever, and she knew she would have to find a way to help him escape without drawing attention. But for now, she focused on small victories, keeping him calm, keeping the diner normal, and keeping herself steady. She also thought about the community, the people who had known her all her life. She wondered what they would think if they found out. Some might be shocked, some might be angry, but she decided that doing the right thing sometimes meant facing judgment, and she felt stronger for it. The diner had always been a place of comfort, a place where people came to eat, talk, and feel safe. Today it was something more, a refuge, a shield against a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. And as the sun moved higher in the sky, she looked at the man resting quietly in the back room and felt a deep sense of resolve. She wouldn't let anything happen to him while he was under her roof. And so, the small diner in the quiet town became the center of a story that no one could have predicted, a story of courage, trust, and humanity. The woman didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. She had made a choice, and she would stand by it, no matter what the consequences might be. The diner had settled into its usual rhythm, with the smell of coffee, toast, and sizzling bacon filling the air. Outside, the sunlight made the small town glow warmly, and inside, the regulars chatted quietly, enjoying their breakfasts. The woman moved gracefully between tables, refilling cups, wiping crumbs from the counters, and greeting each person with a genuine smile. But underneath the normalcy, a quiet tension lingered. She knew that the man hiding in the back room was not safe for long. Her mind replayed his story over and over. He had been running from the police, but not for something truly dangerous. It was just a misunderstanding, or perhaps a mistake that had been blown out of proportion. She understood the feeling of being chased, of being unfairly targeted, and she felt an immediate connection with him. Yet she also knew the dangers of sheltering someone in trouble. If the authorities found him there, it could bring serious consequences for her, for the diner, and for anyone nearby. But her conscience would not allow her to turn him away. For a few quiet moments, she peeked into the back room. The man was sitting on a chair, hunched over slightly, rubbing his hands together as if to chase away the tension. His leather vest was wrinkled from running, and the marks on his face suggested he had been in a struggle or two. She handed him a warm cup of coffee, and he took it gratefully, his hands shaking just a little. She offered him a reassuring smile, which seemed to calm him more than the drink ever could. Then the first sound of trouble reached her. Outside, a patrol car rolled slowly down the street, tires crunching softly on the gravel. She froze for a moment, listening. The officer inside the car seemed to be scanning the neighborhood carefully. Her heart started beating faster, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had faced challenges before, and she knew that panicking would only make things worse. The man in the back room looked up, his eyes wide. "They're close," he whispered. His voice was tense, filled with fear. She nodded and crouched down beside him. "We'll be fine," she said softly, though her own heart was racing. "Just stay calm. I know how to handle this." The next few minutes were a delicate dance. She continued serving customers at the counter, smiling and talking casually as if nothing unusual was happening. Meanwhile, she kept one eye on the back room and another on the front window, watching the street. The police car had stopped nearby and 2 officers got out, walking slowly along the sidewalk as if they were on a routine patrol. Her stomach twisted with anxiety, but she knew she had to stay composed. The officers glanced around, looking at the diner. One of them paused for a moment and then knocked lightly on the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She walked to the door and opened it just a little, keeping her face neutral. "Can I help you?" she asked calmly. The officer's tone was polite but firm. "Ma'am, we're looking for someone. Have you seen a man on a motorcycle? He's wanted for questioning regarding a recent chase." She hesitated for only a second, then replied carefully, "I'm sorry, I haven't seen anyone like that this morning." She smiled faintly, keeping her tone light and friendly. The officer nodded slowly, apparently accepting her answer for now. "We'll be around," he said, and then he and his partner moved down the street, continuing their patrol. Once they were gone, she closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, exhaling deeply. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to move back behind the counter. The man in the back room looked up again, relief washing over his face. You saved me," he said quietly. She shook her head gently. "I'm not done yet," she said. "We need to be smart. They'll be back. We need to figure out a plan to keep you safe." They spent the next hour quietly discussing options, though she didn't press for too many details. She wanted to protect him, not interrogate him. He explained a little about his group, about how life on the road was dangerous and unpredictable. He didn't brag or boast. He simply shared the truth of his experience. She listened carefully, nodding occasionally, offering small words of comfort and maintaining a calm presence. Meanwhile, the diner continued to function normally. Regular customers came and went, some stopping to chat about small-town gossip, others quietly enjoying their meals. She served them all with the same warmth she always had, though inside her mind was constantly alert. Every passing car, every sudden sound, made her glance toward the windows in the back room. The tension never fully left her. As the morning wore on, a few neighbors began to notice the unusual motorcycle outside. One man, curious, wandered toward the diner, peering through the windows. The woman smiled and waved, making small talk to keep up appearances. She had learned long ago how to manage attention and steer curiosity away from sensitive matters. By remaining calm and polite, she could prevent suspicion from growing. The man in the back room shifted nervously, his fingers drumming on the table. "They're not going to stop looking," he said, his voice low. "Eventually they'll figure out I'm here." She nodded, understanding his fear. "Then we need to be ready for that," she replied. "We'll need a way for you to leave quietly without anyone noticing." She spent the next hour quietly planning, thinking through every detail. She considered the layout of the diner, the entrances and exits, and how she could use the back door to get him out without drawing attention. She knew that any sudden movement or suspicious behavior could alert the police or the neighbors. Her experience running the diner, dealing with difficult customers and handling unexpected situations had prepared her for moments like this. By late morning, she had a strategy. She would distract the few customers remaining in the diner, while the man slipped out through the back door. She gathered some supplies, a jacket to cover him, a hat to hide his face, and placed them near the back exit. She spoke quietly to him, explaining what to do step by step. He nodded, trusting her completely. But before they could act, a second police car appeared, this one stopping more aggressively in front of the diner. The officer stepped out quickly and began walking toward the entrance, looking around with sharper eyes than before. She felt a spike of panic but forced herself to remain calm. Her heart raced but her voice stayed steady. As the officers approached, she greeted them warmly. "Good morning. Beautiful day, isn't it?" she said casually, making small talk. Her goal was to appear friendly and unthreatening, to prevent them from suspecting anything unusual inside. The officers paused, slightly taken aback by her composure. One nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Just checking the neighborhood," he said. The woman smiled politely and waved them off. Once they moved on, she let out a quiet breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She turned to the man in the back room. "Okay," she whispered, "now." They moved quickly but quietly. He put on the jacket, pulled the hat low, and followed her instructions perfectly. She opened the back door just a crack, and they slipped outside, staying close to the walls and using the small alley behind the diner as cover. Every step was careful, every movement calculated. They reached a parked van she had spotted earlier, and he climbed in, finally able to breathe a little easier. "Thank you," he said again, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." She shook her head. "Just be careful," she said softly. "And remember, not everyone you meet will be as willing to help. You're lucky today." He nodded, giving her one last grateful look before driving away quietly, leaving the small diner behind. The woman closed the back door and returned inside, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline. She poured herself a cup of coffee, taking a moment to sit and breathe. The diner was quiet again, peaceful on the surface, but inside, she felt the lingering rush of fear and relief intertwined. For the rest of the day, she kept serving her customers with the same warmth and friendliness as always. But there was a new weight in her chest. She had taken a risk, sheltered someone in danger, and helped them escape. The experience left her with a quiet pride, mixed with an understanding of how fragile safety could be. She had done the right thing, but she also knew that actions like these often came with consequences. Even as the sun moved lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the small town, the diner remained a place of warmth and comfort. She cleaned up a little, restocked supplies, and kept the atmosphere calm and welcoming. Yet her mind couldn't stop replaying the events of the morning, the fear, the tension, the relief. She knew that her life, and perhaps the life of the man she had helped, had changed that day. And though she didn't know what would happen next, she was ready to face it. She had acted with courage, compassion, and quick thinking, proving to herself that even in dangerous moments, doing the right thing mattered more than fear. The quiet diner in the small town had become a place of refuge, a place where kindness and bravery had intersected in a way she would never forget. The diner had quieted down after the morning rush, but a heavy tension hung in the air. The woman wiped the counters and refilled coffee cups with her usual smile, but her mind was not on the customers. She knew the danger hadn't passed. The man she had helped earlier was still out there somewhere, but the police could return at any moment. Her instincts told her she had to be ready for anything. As she moved behind the counter, she heard the low rumble of motorcycles approaching from the street. She glanced through the window and saw a small group of riders slowing down. They weren't her regular customers, and she felt a jolt of caution. Their leather vests and serious expressions made it clear they were part of a larger group, perhaps the same one the man belonged to. She had no idea whether they were friendly or hostile, but her gut told her they weren't here to cause trouble. Still, caution was necessary. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden screech of tires outside. A patrol car had pulled up quickly in front of the diner, and two officers jumped out, moving fast toward the entrance. Her heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to remain calm. Customers glanced toward the door, sensing the tension, but none of them could understand what was really happening. She smiled politely, maintaining her composure, and greeted the officers as they approached. "Good afternoon," she said warmly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. She knew that calmness and politeness could be her strongest shield right now. The officers looked around, eyes scanning the diner carefully. "Ma'am," one said, "we're looking for someone. Have you seen a man with tattoos and a leather vest? He might be hiding nearby." She shook her head slowly. "I haven't seen anyone like that today," she said softly, keeping her tone casual and friendly. She didn't move too fast or make sudden gestures. Her goal was to appear normal, unthreatening, and calm. The officers exchanged a glance but seemed to accept her answer for now. "We'll be around," one said, and they moved back toward their car. She exhaled quietly, though her heart was still racing. That had been too close for comfort. Once the officers were gone, she leaned against the counter and rubbed her hands together. The diner returned to its usual rhythm, with the smell of coffee, eggs, and bacon filling the air. Customers talked quietly, oblivious to the tension that had just passed. But she didn't let her guard down. She knew the situation was far from over. Her thoughts returned to the man in the back room. Even though he was gone, she felt responsible for him. She had risked a lot to help him, and now she had to stay alert to protect herself, her diner, and the secret she held. The adrenaline from the morning rush still pulsed through her veins, making her movements sharper, her senses more aware of every sound. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The diner continued to serve regular customers who chatted about small-town gossip, the weather, and their daily routines. But in the woman's mind, every moment felt fragile. She kept glancing at the windows, listening for the slightest sound of a police car, a stranger approaching, or anything unusual. Then came the unmistakable sound of motorcycles again. This time the roar was louder, closer, and impossible to ignore. She stepped to the window and saw a long line of bikes slowing down in front of the diner. Her breath caught. She counted, nearly 50 riders at first glance, all wearing leather vests, moving with precision and purpose. They were members of the motorcycle club, and her heart raced with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She didn't know what to expect. Some of them could be angry, some curious, some simply curious about what had happened to their friend. But one thing was clear. They were here because of her actions. Her decision to help the man had not gone unnoticed. She opened the door slightly and stepped out to greet them, keeping her posture relaxed and her voice calm. "Can I help you?" she asked politely, though her mind was alert for any sudden moves. The leader of the group, a tall man with a strong presence, stepped forward. He didn't smile, but there was respect in his eyes. "We heard what you did," he said in a low, serious voice. "You helped one of ours when he was in trouble. That means a lot." She nodded quietly. "I just did what I felt was right," she replied. "He needed help, and I couldn't turn him away." The riders glanced at each other, then at her diner. There was a silent understanding passing between them. These were not people to be taken lightly, but they had respect for courage and compassion. She felt a strange relief, though her body still tensed. One of the riders spoke next, softer this time. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said. "We just want to thank you for what you did. You protected one of ours when no one else would." Her lips curved into a small, surprised smile. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't expect anything in return. I just wanted to help." The leader nodded. "That's why we respect you. Most people wouldn't take the risk, but you did." He glanced around at the other riders. "Let's make sure she knows we mean no harm. Everyone, stay calm." The group slowly began to settle around the diner, some standing, some sitting on their bikes, but all keeping a respectful distance. Their presence was intimidating, no doubt, but it was not hostile. She took a deep breath and went back inside, resuming her role as host and server. She poured coffee, refilled plates, and even joked lightly with a few of the riders who had chosen to sit at tables. The diner felt alive with an unusual energy, part tension, part gratitude, part awe. As the afternoon wore on, she observed the interactions carefully. The bikers were polite, even friendly in their own rough way. They talked among themselves, quietly, occasionally sharing stories of the road, the places they had been, the dangers they had faced. Their voices carried a sense of camaraderie and loyalty that was rare to see in ordinary life. She realized that their world was very different from hers, but in that moment, their values, loyalty, protection, respect, intersected with hers in a meaningful way. The woman moved carefully between tables, serving food and drinks, making small talk where appropriate, and maintaining her composure. She noticed the riders noticing her attentiveness, her calm demeanor, and her courage. She did not need to prove herself. Their eyes already acknowledged it. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street, she took a moment to step outside. The air was warm, and the distant hum of the motorcycles blended with the quiet sounds of the town. The leader of the riders approached her. "You handled yourself well today," he said. "Not many people would have done what you did. You kept calm, smart, and strong. That's respect." She felt a mix of pride and humility. "I just wanted to help," she said softly. "I didn't think about respect or recognition. I just acted." He nodded slowly. "That's why you earned our respect, and why we're here, to make sure you know you're appreciated." For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine the consequences of her actions. She had risked a lot by helping the man earlier, but now she saw that courage could create unexpected bonds. People, even those from very different worlds, recognized integrity and bravery. Her diner, usually just a place to eat and chat, had become a sanctuary, a stage where respect and trust intersected in real, human ways. The riders stayed for a while longer, eating, talking quietly, and sharing smiles in their rough, understated way. She served them patiently, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie herself. In the back of her mind, she knew that this was a moment she would never forget, the day strangers became allies, and courage was rewarded in the most unexpected form. Eventually, the riders began to leave, one by one, carefully and respectfully. The leader paused at the door and turned back to her. "If you ever need help," he said, "you'll find us around. We don't forget people who do the right thing." She nodded quietly, her heart still racing from the intensity of the day. "Thank you," she said, and as they disappeared down the street, the diner returned to its familiar quiet. But inside, she felt forever changed. The events of the day had tested her courage, her instincts, and her kindness. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, and she had come through with her principles intact. She realized that life was unpredictable, that danger could appear anywhere, but that standing by one's values could create bonds that transcended fear. She went back to cleaning tables, restocking supplies, and serving the few remaining customers, but her mind kept replaying the day's events, the man in need, the police pursuit, the tension, and finally, the unexpected gratitude of the motorcycle riders. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing she had done the right thing, even when it was risky and frightening. The diner, once just a simple place to eat, had become a symbol of courage, compassion, and respect. And she, a woman who had simply acted with humanity, had earned a place in the hearts of people she might never see again. The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet town, casting a warm golden glow across the streets. The small diner was just opening for business, and the woman moved through it as she always did. She wiped counters, refilled coffee cups, and arranged plates with her usual care. Her movements were smooth and practiced, and her smile greeted every early customer who stepped through the door. But there was a strange feeling in the air today, a sense of anticipation that she couldn't quite place. The smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the diner, mingling with the faint scent of morning dew that had blown in from the street. A few regulars trickled in, chatting quietly about the weather or the local news. Everything seemed normal on the surface, yet she felt a ripple of unease, a subtle tension that made her glance at the door more often than usual. Her mind wandered, back to the events of the previous day, the man she had helped, the police pursuit, and the small group of bikers who had arrived afterward. She had thought that was the end of it, that the danger had passed and life could return to its usual rhythm. But deep down, she knew that her actions had not gone unnoticed. The world she had entered yesterday, the world of bikers and loyalty, had a way of moving fast and leaving no room for hesitation. She did not yet know what to expect, but instinct told her to be ready. Then came the sound she had been subconsciously listening for, the low, deep rumble of engines. At first it was faint, distant, almost indistinguishable from the hum of daily traffic. But within minutes the sound grew louder, filling the street outside with a vibration that she could feel in her chest. She stepped to the window and looked out. Her eyes widened. Hundreds of motorcycles were approaching, the riders moving with precision and purpose. There were easily 200 of them, stretching down the street as far as she could see. Their leather vests glinted in the morning sun, and their engines roared. In a unified symphony that made the windows of the diner shake slightly, the woman felt a mixture of fear and awe. She had expected some bikers, maybe a dozen or so, but this was something else entirely. Her mind raced. She had no idea how they had found out about her actions, but it was clear that their visit was connected to her. She thought about the man she had helped, the one they had referred to as one of theirs, and realized that the loyalty and gratitude of this group was far greater than anything she had imagined. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. Panic would not help her or anyone else. As the bikers approached, she noticed the leader of the group at the front. He nodded once toward her, a subtle gesture of recognition and respect. She understood immediately. They were not here to cause trouble. They were here to show gratitude, to honor her courage and the risk she had taken. Still, the sight of so many motorcycles and riders was intimidating. The first few bikers pulled up near the diner, cutting their engines in unison. The roar of the motorcycles faded to a low hum, leaving a heavy silence in the street. The woman opened the door carefully and stepped outside, her hand slightly trembling but her posture steady. She knew that whatever happened next, she needed to maintain composure and confidence. The leader spoke first. His voice was calm, but firm, carrying the weight of authority without aggression. "We came to thank you," he said. "Yesterday you helped one of ours when he had no one else to turn to. That means more than you can imagine." She shook her head gently. "I just did what I thought was right," she said softly. "I didn't do it for thanks or recognition. I just couldn't turn him away." The leader smiled faintly, a rare gesture that softened his otherwise stern expression. "That's exactly why we respect you. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. You kept him safe when it was dangerous for you. That's loyalty in its purest form." As he spoke, more bikers began to dismount from their motorcycles, forming a respectful semicircle around the diner. They weren't loud or threatening. Instead, their presence was a statement of gratitude and solidarity. She could see that some of them carried small tokens of appreciation, a patch, a bottle of their favorite drink, even a simple nod or handshake. But none were intrusive or demanding. Their respect was genuine. She stepped back inside the diner to continue her work, pouring coffee and serving breakfast to the few customers who had arrived that morning. The bikers followed, some sitting at tables, others leaning casually against the counters. Despite their intimidating appearance, they were remarkably polite, letting her move freely and continuing to speak quietly among themselves. She observed them closely, noting the details, the tattoos, the patches on their vests, the hardened expressions softened by gratitude. They were not the violent stereotypes she had sometimes feared. They were people bound together by loyalty and respect, values that she could understand and relate to. In a strange way, this encounter bridged two worlds. Hers, small and ordinary, and theirs, rough and unpredictable. Yet in this moment, they were united by something simple and human, recognition of courage and integrity. One of the bikers, a tall man with a kind face and soft eyes, approached her. He spoke quietly so as not to disturb the others. "We just wanted to make sure you knew how much this means to us," he said. "Not many people would take the risk like you did. You didn't hesitate, and that's rare." She smiled faintly, a mixture of humility and pride. "I didn't do it for praise," she replied. "I just wanted to help someone who needed it." "I never expected anything in return." The leader nodded again, speaking to the group in low tones. A few of them approached her with small gifts, cups of coffee, a few pastries, and even a handcrafted sign for her diner. Each gesture was quiet, respectful, and sincere. She accepted them with gratitude, realizing that the smallest acts could carry enormous meaning. Throughout the morning, the bikers stayed, not demanding anything, not causing trouble, simply sitting quietly, sharing stories among themselves, and occasionally thanking her again. She continued serving her regular customers with the same warmth she always had. But she noticed something extraordinary. The atmosphere in the diner had shifted. It was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a space of respect, trust, and human connection. She observed a small group of younger riders sitting quietly and watching her work. Their expressions were serious but attentive, as if they were learning something from her composure, her courage, and her ability to stay calm under pressure. She realized that her actions had left an impression beyond the immediate gratitude. They had inspired respect and admiration, even in people whose lives were vastly different from her own. By late morning, the bikers began to prepare to leave. They mounted their motorcycles in a slow, deliberate rhythm, creating a sense of ceremony in their departure. Before riding off, the leader approached her once more. "If you ever need anything," he said, "remember that loyalty works both ways. You helped one of ours, and now we'll always be around if you need us." She nodded quietly, touched by the sincerity of his words. "Thank you," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I'll remember that." As the motorcycles roared, down the street fading into the distance, the diner returned to its usual quiet state. The morning sunlight continued to pour through the windows, illuminating the wooden counters and polished floors. The woman leaned against the counter, exhaling deeply, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of what had just happened. Her heart was full of a strange mix of emotions: relief that the bikers had left peacefully, pride in having acted courageously, and awe at the unexpected bonds that human kindness could create. The small diner, which had always been a place of comfort for her regular customers, had become a symbol of courage and respect, a place where two very different worlds had intersected in the most human way. As she cleaned up and served the remaining customers, she reflected on the events of the past 2 days. She realized that life could be unpredictable, that danger could appear when least expected, and that courage often required risk. Yet she also understood that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could have enormous ripple effects, creating gratitude, loyalty, and respect in ways she had never imagined. By the afternoon, the diner was quiet once again. She sat at a table near the window, sipping her coffee and watching the street outside. The town seemed ordinary, calm, and peaceful, but she knew that her life had been touched by something extraordinary. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, and in doing so, she had created connections that transcended social boundaries and personal risk. The woman smiled to herself, a quiet, satisfied smile. She knew that the story of what had happened here would not be forgotten quickly, not by the bikers, not by the man she had helped, and perhaps not even by the people of the town who sensed the unusual energy in the diner. And she also knew that she had discovered something important about herself, that courage, kindness, and integrity could shine even in the most unlikely places, leaving a lasting impact that went far beyond the moment. And so, the diner remained, a place of warmth and human connection, a small refuge in a quiet town where extraordinary events had unfolded, leaving behind memories of bravery, gratitude, and respect that would linger long after the engines had faded into the distance. The diner had returned to its usual rhythm, but the events of the past days lingered in the woman's mind. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the polished counters and familiar booths, and the smell of coffee and fresh toast created the comforting atmosphere her regulars loved. Yet she knew that things were different now. Something had shifted. Her diner was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a symbol of courage, kindness, and unexpected respect. The town itself seemed unchanged, calm and quiet, but she noticed subtle differences in the way people looked at her. Some regulars whispered quietly to each other, stealing glances in her direction, curiosity mingling with admiration. Others approached her politely, asking questions about the unusual visitors that had arrived the day before. She answered carefully, keeping the focus on the diner and the regular routine, not wanting to exaggerate or invite unnecessary attention. She knew that the story of the biker's visit would travel quickly, and she wanted to handle it with grace. As she moved through the diner, refilling coffee cups and serving breakfast, her thoughts drifted back to the man she had helped. She hoped he was safe, that he had made it to a place where the police wouldn't find him, and that he understood the depth of her concern and the risk she had taken. Despite the danger he had brought into her life, she felt a connection to him, a sense of having done something meaningful that transcended fear and risk. Helping him had been instinctive, a choice rooted in compassion, and she felt quietly proud of herself for having acted without hesitation. The memory of the biker's arrival was still vivid in her mind. The sheer number of motorcycles, the deep roar of engines, and the respectful way they had approached her had been overwhelming. Yet it had also been affirming. She realized that courage and kindness could create bonds even in the most unlikely circumstances, people, even those from worlds very different from hers.